the only way you can get people to give him money is by lying about his opponent and painting his opponent as an extremist on an issue that isn't even relevant? That's really sad. You kind of have to feel bad for them. Now, the key is, and I don't care who you want to win, by the way. I don't care if you're a big Bob Ferguson fan. I don't care if you're a Mark Mullet fan, Sammy Bird fan, Dave Reichert, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter to me. Your vote is your vote. But I think we should all want to be in a place where especially our chosen candidates, especially our chosen political party, isn't trying to scare us for money. There was an interesting poll out over the weekend that initially I'm like, oh, good for Dave Reichert. And then I was like, the skeptic in me was sort of like, this timing is so suspicious. The Northwest Progressive Institute says, based on a poll of 700 likely voters, Dave Reichert in a head-to-head with Bob Ferguson is 2% ahead, 46% to 44%. So I was like, good for him. But then I was like, the skeptic in me, and I was talking to some folks about this particular polling entity, the Northwest Progressive Institute. And I was reminded that it was released at a very strategic time. So obviously the Northwest Progressive Institute is a biased institution. They want progressives to be elected. The thing is that the poll was released just before a legislative fundraising freeze. So keep in mind, in Washington state, for a month prior to the legislative session and during the legislative session, you cannot, as a legislator and a current elected official, you cannot fundraise. And so that is certainly going to put Bob Ferguson at a disadvantage to Dave Reichert, who is not going to be bound by that legislative freeze. So you get this poll that comes out showing, this is a tight race coming up in 2024, released by the Northwest Progressive Institute right before Bob Ferguson has to cease fundraising efforts for the legislative session. And then you saw, like clockwork, how this was all orchestrated and timed out. Bob Ferguson, the Washington State Democratic Party, they go to social media and they put out these desperate pleas. Bob Ferguson, in the last two open seat gubernatorial races in Washington, the average margin was just 1.5%. We've always known our race against Dave Reichert would be close. Chip in to help us keep anti-choice Dave Reichert out of Olympia. The Washington Democrats, even more desperate. Dave Reichert, an anti-abortion extreme Republican, is leading over Democratic champion Bob Ferguson. You gotta love that sentence. We cannot afford to lose this governor's seat to someone with such dangerous and extreme values. And then in the next tweet, they asked for money. So look, I'm not saying that the poll results were manufactured. I'm not saying that it's a fake poll or that it's not reliable. The Northwest Progressive Institute, when it releases polling, has been fairly reliable in the past. But that does not mean that the timing of the release wasn't orchestrated so that Bob Ferguson and the Democrats could fear-monger for money. Fear-monger for money, because apparently that's the only way that they can get people to donate is if they try to scare the hell out of you. And you'll note, when the Washington Democrats say an anti-abortion extreme Republican, they just think all Republicans are extreme. If you're going to call Dave Reichert an extreme Republican, the state Democratic Party just believes that if you are a Republican, if you're a conservative, you are an extremist. And they should just say as much, because they paint every single Republican as an extremist. This is a fear-mongering technique and tactic that unfortunately has worked a lot for them in the past. It's their favorite tactic. Ever since Donald Trump came on the political scene, let's just tie everyone to Donald Trump, even though Dave Reichert has never been a particular fan of Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. And this whole anti-abortion, when the Democrats say he's an anti-abortion extremist, Bob Ferguson says he's an anti-choice candidate. Here's the thing. Dave Reichert's personal opinion is that he's pro-life. That is true. But he came out at the very onset of this campaign and said that he would never, as the governor, take action to unwind, roll back what Washington voters have put in place in our state when it comes to access to abortion. Washington voters decided decades ago what they wanted our abortion access to be in this state. And he said, in some crazy universe, if there were Republican control of the House, Republican control of the Senate, he were a Republican in the governor's office, and if some crazy universe, Republicans wanted to spend that time and that majority sending up some sort of restriction to abortion to his desk, that he wouldn't sign it, that he would send it to voters. So he has been very clear that if the issue of abortion were ever to come up in his time as governor, which is very, very unlikely because, again, there would have to be a solid Republican majority in the House and the Senate, that he would send it to voters to make a decision on, because it is voters decades ago who decided what our abortion law would be. So it's contingent on Dave Reichert to continue to get that out there. But I think it also shows for Democrats, that's all they have. That is all they have. The only trick they have is to scare people into voting for their candidates. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? That's the only thing. Bob Ferguson has been in a public office all this time. And instead of lauding and trying to get people to donate to his campaign based on his credentials and based on policies he's pushed that you think are great and will encourage people to donate to his campaign, the only way you can get people to give him money is by lying about his opponent and painting his opponent as an extremist on an issue that isn't even relevant. That's really sad. You kind of have to feel bad for them. Now, the key is, and I don't care who you want to win, by the way. I don't care if you're a big Bob Ferguson fan. I don't care if you're a Mark Mullet fan, Sammy Byrd fan, Dave Reichert, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter to me. Your vote is your vote. But I think we should all want to be in a place where especially our chosen candidates, especially our chosen political party, isn't trying to scare us for money. I've never understood that with, the low bar we set for the people we vote for. The low bar we set for the parties we support. You're supporting them. You like them. Why do you have a lower bar for their conduct and their behavior than you do the other party? That doesn't make any sense. Clearly, you don't think much of the other person if you're not voting for them. So I feel like it should bother every single voter in Washington when, especially in these economic times, you have political parties and candidates who are using fear, who are trying to instill fear in people as a way to get their money. I have yet to see Dave Reichert one time ask for fundraise off fear-mongering. And he shouldn't have to. He doesn't have to. He has a strong record. He's the right candidate for the right time. I've said that he is my choice for 2024. And I would be disappointed if I saw Dave Reichert out there fundraising like this, fundraising off fear. So shame on the state Democratic Party, although this is not a surprise, but I think we have to, as soon as the anti-abortion, extreme Republican, MAGA, whatever shtick that they run, as soon as that wears off, they have nothing left. They have to talk about their failed policies on public safety. They have to talk about their overtaxation to the point where they're bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that they are then paying people to study how to spend. If you have to study how to spend tax revenue, you probably don't need the tax revenue. So the last thing Democrats want to do is have to actually debate based on the merits of their ideas and their policies. God forbid, because I don't think that will end well for them.